Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday meeting, and happy to see you all. And what are we going to talk about today? Who's got an idea? Melissa, yay.
Hello. Well, I have a question. I don't know if it's like a topic for the day, but I had a thought.
Get us started.
Um, just go. Okay.
Just go, yeah.
Um, well, I've been wondering, what's your perspective on, or what's the teaching on, like, as practitioners, should we be evangelizing about the practice? Should we be telling everyone we know? Come practice? I mean, I write about it. People kind of know it about me, but like, what's the teaching on that?
Well, the teaching I'm familiar with is, has to do with, I think it's one of the precepts, don't be greedy, especially with the Dharma. So, evangelizing, I think, has carries a certain connotation that's negative. And,
Yeah.
I know, and we all know that sometimes, talking to people about religion is, they put up a lot of barriers right away, and they resist that. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be open about our own practice. If people are interested, or, you just have to be sensitive about it. And um, I think what we're all doing is good for ourselves and good for our communities and families and the planet. And so but yeah, if you want to stand on a street corner and read some sutra, the Diamond Sutra out loud, that might work. I don't know, give it a try. I mean, I'm probably the chief evangelist around here, right? Because I'm running the website and sending out emails and and trying to think of ways to get the word out. And you know it's a lot of we put a lot of effort into it, and we get new people, but I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. It's true. Don't be stingy with the Dharma. It's important to remember. Hmm. You know what's funny is I didn't, and it wasn't until I received the precepts in May. This is going to sound so dumb. I was like, wait, did I join a religion? Like, I've never thought about it as a religion. Does anyone relate to that? Like, I'm like, it's a practice, it's a way of life, everything. But there's still like the disowning of, well, religion's just a word people don't like anymore, you know? But I
Yeah,
mean, I believe I've joined the lineage. Like, I know that I made the commitment. Anyway, the word religion is just such a,
it's loaded.
yeah,
It's
yeah, people
loaded.
hate it.
Well, yeah, but why, um I think because, oops, there's my alarm. Well, one thing to notice, I think, is, over the centuries, no two religions have ever merged. They've only split and split and split and split, including Buddhism, right? There's a million different schools and chapters and types of, uh, you might say Eastern religions that are, they get onto one thing and they get going with that, and they find some members, and then they get enough members, and pretty soon those members are like, well, I think we should start our own because these guys don't quite have it right, and we do. And I think that just points right back to the Buddha's original teachings about suffering and why we suffer, and it's because we are deluded about certain principles, and we have conceptual thinking that that is usually dualistic, up, down, right, left, so good, bad. And so everybody's got an opinion, right? And everybody wants to feel right. And so, and we're, very independent, and we really want to be independent. And so there we go. So it splits off into all sorts of things. Now, is Buddhism a religion? Well, depends on how you define religion. I mean, if religion only is a religion if they are worshiping a higher power, like God or something, well, then there's just a few religions, really. If it's just if you're just sort of following a philosophy, well, then there's zillions of those, and are all those religions, and people have, and I know, in the political world, at least in the US, people who want to detract from other people who have different philosophies say, oh, they're just, that's their religion, your religion is gender ideology, or your religion is fascism, or your religion is this, that, or the other thing, or, whatever the issues of the day is, And so they use the word religion in kind of in a negative way that way, like implying that they call that philosophy or way of life a religion because religion has a bad connotation, and it implies that those people are blind to everything else except their own philosophy, right? So I think culturally it's an interesting thing. When I talk to people, people ask me about Buddhism or whatever, just in my daily life, or, the relatives or neighbors or whoever I happen to run into, they find out I'm a Buddhist. There's a certain curiosity there. And they kind of I've noticed that they basically just want me to give them a 1-minute summary, and also to reassure them that I'm not going to be a crazy neighbor or something, Back when I was first getting into Buddhism, and I had kind of my first, I think, sort of big dramatic realizations, I was really enthusiastic about it, and I told all my friends about it. And of course, they already had me pigeonholed a certain way. I was this guy who was a friend of theirs, and they knew I liked football and music and different things, and they kind of had me pegged. And when I all of a sudden started talking about Buddhism, a lot of them just kind of shied away a little bit, but I was kind of going overboard. I mean, I was really evangelizing. And I don't know, maybe some of those people now come around and went, oh yeah, gosh, Bruce was talking about this 20 years ago, and it's kind of interesting, and I'm kind of looking into it myself. Or maybe they just shut off. I don't know. It's, we never know the extent of our karmic reach, kind of, with our actions. We don't really know how far they resonate. So, but I think, I always encourage, all of our members, like, if you have a friend who's interested or at all, just share your Zoom link with them, invite them to a class like this, and they can ask their questions, and, I'll be nice to them. I won't freak them out. But, Buddhism has a lot of religious trappings, you might say. We do the ceremonies, we have robes, we have an altar with candles and, incense and flowers and all that, and statue of the Buddha or Manjushri or Kanzeon up there. And, it looks very religious. When I was doing Tibetan practice for a few years before I got into Zen, it's very religious looking. And the Tibetan temples are filled with amazing paintings of all these crazy looking characters, and all the, all these sort of gods and demigods who are blue and green and yellow and red, and there's fire around them, and everybody's got halos, and it's really, and I think that freaks out a lot of Westerners. They're like, I'm not going to do that. And at first I was just more curious than anything, and then when I got into more Tibetan practice and was going to this temple up in Seattle all the time, I started to learn that these things were representations of different aspects of ourselves and different principles of Buddhism, but they came from Tibetan culture, and maybe they understand them right away, but it took me a while to kind of figure it out, and I had to ask a lot of questions. But with Big Mind, I mean, we're doing the same thing. We just don't, we're talking to all these aspects of ourselves, both good and bad, or helpful or unhelpful aspects of ourselves. And we just don't draw crazy pictures about those things and, put them up all over the place. But the Tibetans are doing the same thing. It's just a cultural thing. So in the West, the debate has been for a long time, what's it going to look like in the West, really? Well, how's it going to end up looking? Genpo Roshi and Bernie and Glassman and Joan Halifax, all these people that learned from Japanese masters and learned all the forms and the robes and the ceremonies and everything. Many of them kept that very strongly. If you go to Upaya Zen Center, where Joan Halifax Roshi is, they very much follow all those methods and the look and feel of what Maizumi Roshi did. On the other end of the spectrum, we have us, and Genpo Roshi, most of the time you see him in a t-shirt, and we're very Western and trying to reach people in our cultural way. The teachings are exactly the same, whether you're Tibetan or Zen or whatever. So for the sake of trying to bring it to Westerners, I think some people, are really attracted to the Japanese aesthetic because it's nice and it's functional. The way a Zendo is set up is very functional for meditation. But I think a lot of people too that come to Buddhism in the West are maybe trying to escape our culture and sort of immerse themselves in a different culture that makes them feel a little better, and get some separation. And that's an okay motivation at first, but ultimately you have to live your life in, where there's shopping malls and cars and, Western music and all the rest of it. Yeah, so it's a big debate, like how's it going to end up? And I think it's going to take a few generations for something, will there be a Western sort of style Zen uniform, you might say, maybe, I don't know. I still wear my rakusu, when I'm teaching, but I don't wear any of the rest of the time, except for ceremonies and stuff. The other side of that coin, though, is that sometimes people don't really think you're authentic unless you're doing it with robes on and altars and things like that. So it's an interesting question. Who knows where it's going to end up? I'm kind of curious, all of you who've been at this for a while, when you first discovered Buddhism, what was your impression and what was your introduction, or how did you, what made you feel like it was authentic and real and worth doing?
Well, I can talk if nobody wants to jump forward.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Well, I first got into Buddhism. I'd taken a couple classes in college, but I first really got into Buddhism with Bill Harris and the Holosync and his accelerated change maximizer and all this stuff where he talked about the non-dual nature of things, like that we are waves on an ocean and the waves eventually go back down into the ocean and cling to wanting to be waves continuously, you know, and there was a philosophy about that.
Mhm.
And then I was introduced to Big Mind through Ken Wilber, and Genpo had done Big Mind at one of these places, and I got some secret illegal recordings of him with Ken Wilber and blah, 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 stuff like that. And then I studied a Theravadan course, and then I've done some other particular things. And then up till recently, you know, I haven't really been accomplishing a whole lot in terms of Buddhism. But recently I've been in a course with you for a year, and I've also been paralleling what they call the Lam Rim course, Lam Rim,
Mhm.
you know, and the steps of meditation and all that kind of thing. And what's really alive for me right now is not so much Buddhism or not so much, you know, East meets West and all that kind of stuff, but the kind of online circling practices that I'm involved in and the kind of ways that I'm encouraging people to share with each other what their experience is. And I think that Big Mind has a whole lot to offer in terms of facilitating these kind of processes. And not only that, when we have a great group of people who have backgrounds in Buddhism, who've studied this and that religion, and they're different, yet they're similar, we sort of create a space where all of our practice can come from to the forefront, and all of it can sort of speak for itself beyond our individual selves. And that's what really makes me really happy, to be able to sit with that and to be able to share with all of us as a
Yeah.
sangha, and to realize we're open to that kind of a thing, and realize the trust in a solid understanding. Say, when you can talk about Zen Buddhism versus Taoism, and you can share that with friends and not go too far with someone, or, oh, let me be all Zen and let me make my friend feel bad because, oh, I'm right and I'm enlightened and I'm this, you know, learning in the moment how to live with what I've got and appreciate where I'm going. So I don't know if that answers your question. You can ask more, but there's a lot of
Yeah.
complexity to my practice that I just haven't shared.
Yeah, no, I get it. I think for you, and maybe for me too, you know, my first, it was hearing or reading or something, a couple of the basic principles or the sort of Buddhist view of the world that got me interested. And I think that had me so interested, I sort of overlooked the outward appearance maybe, and didn't really mind it so much when I went to Tibetan place. Gloria.
Hello. I discovered Zen when I was 16 or something, reading a book by Alan Watts, and I remember the think of being authentic, being able to realize your authentic self. This touched me so much. I wanted to, and I was so interested by this book that I started over there. I started to look and to study and I started over there at 16. And yeah.
When did you first join a group or something like that?
When I was 20 something, it was a Theravadan group and Gurdjieff group, you know?
Oh, Gurdjieff, yeah.
Yeah. And then when I was 30, I was already in the Zen way. But always as a lay woman, always.
Yeah.
And I don't see why, I don't understand why I didn't take the vows, or what. I don't know. I'm interested, I'm deeply interested, but I cannot go in that way. I don't know why.
Yeah. I think a lot of people feel the same way. That's fine. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
And also, there is something about the lineages that I don't I don't know if it helps or if it helps. I don't know if being in a lineage it can help in which way.
I don't know that the lineage itself is, the lineage is all priests, right? And there's been, lots and lots of priests and monks, but there's been far more lay people in Buddhism, far more throughout the history of it. So, if you're interested in being a priest or that, I think that's, a route you can take, but I don't think it excludes you or keeps you from your own enlightenment or, you know, I just think that's the priestly class, you know. And some people are drawn to that and some aren't. But I don't think the Buddha necessarily thought that everybody should be a monk or anything. I think he was interested in a much wider,
Hmm.
broader appeal.
And the other day I was listening to Krishnamurti's talk, and he says that guru is the poison. And it's amazing. And well, I don't know.
You
He
know,
said,
I read Krishnamurti a long time ago. I think I might pick it up again now.
I love Krishnamurti.
Yeah, I remember being.
Hmm. I think he's so clever. He's so direct. Oof, I love
Yeah,
it. When I'm driving, I have a podcast, and I'm always drive with his voice, and
yeah,
it's very interesting.
yeah. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Meg.
Yeah, for me, when I got into Buddhism, I had been really a spiritual seeker. I had, gone to ashrams. I had a very intensive yoga practice that was back in those days. It was less, stretching and more. You only got into it if you were interested in it from a different perspective.
Yeah,
And I fell into Buddhism when I was traveling in India and Nepal, and it was mostly Tibetan Buddhism, which does have much more of a feel of religion to me than Zen.
yeah,
And I loved it, right? And I loved that aspect of it. And I couldn't at the time at least make a distinction between religion and spirituality. And so for me, it really was a religious practice, and it meant, I'm very animistic in my approach to things. And so we did a lot of desert retreats, and that combination of meditation and nature was very powerful and very spiritual. And, when I go to major ceremonies, Tokudo, Jukai, transmission, Fusatsu, the Buddhas and the patriarchs are there in the room with me.
yeah,
And I know it's supposed to be Buddhas and ancestors now, but I learned, Buddhas and patriarchs. And so that's what it feels like.
yeah,
And it's not gendered anyway. But for me, it is, and I'm a monk. For me, it was a religious practice. And one of the things I find myself questioning now is it seems to move more and more in my life away from religion and into, something very pragmatic. And I miss the religious aspect of it. So anyway, that's just my experience. Oh, and on the proselytizing thing, I've always been clear about my Buddhism, and I've had friends who have started retreats and become Buddhists
yeah,
because of talking about it. I would never talk to strangers about it,
right.
or even friends who I knew were not into stuff like this in more than a casual way.
Yeah,
So I have maybe a slightly different feel about proselytizing, but maybe it's the same. what Melissa, what you're doing now seems to me like the perfect thing, right? People are aware of it. You're writing about it. If anyone is interested, they can pursue it more. So anyway, that's just my opinion. And Bruce, you're the teacher, so you have, you know, more insight into this. But I've found that to be very successful. And I'm super proud of people I've talked to who've come into practice. I think it's really one of the things that, you know, has created probably the best karma of my life. But so anyway, that's all.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Meg. Thanks. Dorothy.
Hi.
Hi.
I came from the how can you say, the New Age movement, you know, about spirituality, meditation, clairvoyance, and things, and had some personal crisis. And I met a Tibetan Lama who's living in Copenhagen, and I went to a lot of things and had a lot of, what do you call it, lectures from the scriptures. And what appealed to me was, how can I put it, you know, the truth of what they were saying. Like, you know, there's sickness, you're gonna die, instead of all that being so positive. It really appealed to me. Yeah, and then I went on having a guru, which was beautiful for me. And now with Zen, I think in all the things, it's not the ceremonies for me, it's the what is the content. You know, the feeling where you can, you know, where you have the feeling that's yeah, I don't know, how can I say it? Do you know what I mean? That
So.
it's true. It's not when I go to the church here, the priest is, you know, usually saying things, but they're not there.
Yeah. You know, I think something you said right at the very beginning that I think all of us can relate to is that when you hear something that is just profoundly true, you can't unhear it. You can't do anything but just sort of accept that. And we hear so little nowadays in a way that we can really say is just so true that it's something that I'll actually, you know, has changed me. You know, that we talk about Manjushri's sword, you know, it's something that just can cut right through, and oftentimes, you know, truth will help cut away a lot of delusions, right? Because in the absence of truth, that's all we have left. And yeah, so and I think that goes back to what Sam was saying too about, you know, you hear these things, and depending on how clearly they're put or how artful, like Krishnamurti, how artful the teacher is in stating things and explaining principles, or even with Roshi, it's just brilliant because it's not just that he tells you things, he helps you actually experience those truths. This is the wonderful thing I think about Big Mind. I mean, you know, when you speak as a particular voice, I mean, it's your truth, you know, and it does cut through delusion, and I think we just want more and more of that. you know, anybody who's sort of honest about life and about themselves and their own history and everything, you know, we just really want to know the truth. And like it says in the Bible, the truth will set you free, you know, and it does. Yeah, I don't know that anybody just off the street would necessarily will walk into a Zen temple or a Tibetan temple or something like that and say, hey, this looks really great. I think it starts with hearing some truth and then going and then thinking, where did this come from? And do they have more? And I want to find out. And you start pursuing it. And for me, like I enjoy the ceremonies, and you know, I think ceremonies are an important part of being a human, you know, not just Buddhist ceremonies, but you know, marriage ceremonies and funerals and all the little ceremonies that we have in life they're important, you know, they're not necessarily totally profound or anything like that, but they're important. And I think it helps give a framework around life and around our philosophy. But underlying it all really is this search for truth and yeah, thank you so much, Dorothy. Tammy.
Hi, yeah, hi Bruce.
Hi.
So my perspective's a little bit different. I wasn't actually searching for anything, and I had no interest whatsoever in spirituality. I was practicing medicine. I was very happy with it. Everything was going great, and basically I got hit upside the head. Kind of time to wake up. So things came to me unexpectedly, and you know, it all started and I was in my 50s at the time. It all started with me picking up a spiritual book in a bookstore, thinking, I don't read that shit, and I put it down, and then I ended up outside the store having bought it, going, what the hell? You know, who bought this? Who bought this thing? You know, so I read it, and then I realized what the main thing I got out of that, it's not important which one it was, but okay, there's something going on that I've been missing. That I got, you know. So then that led to some reading, and somehow I got into Ken Wilber, not as a, you know, a spiritual teacher, but you know, he talked about those things and talked a lot about the territory. And so then when I heard him, I was driving in a car and heard him interviewing Genpo Roshi, and then Roshi started facilitating, you know, on that call. It was like, boom, oh, this is the territory. The rest was the map. It was all about the map, and it's like, this is it. And so that was the, you know, so that's how I ended up with, you know, seeking out Roshi. Then I called you and questioned you about that retreat in Kripalu, and I was kind of cautious about going to, because I thought, Zen, what the hell? I don't know. You have to be Zen to go. You're like, oh no, you don't. You know, it's like, okay. And I was interested in the big mind part, so it was a big mind workshop, and then Tozan's 5 ranks, and I went, and you know, and I thought it would be a one-off, and you know, it started on a Friday night. Saturday afternoon, I walked up to this guy and asked him to be my teacher. I didn't even know what that meant. Literally, it was all like, who's doing this? After that, I called my husband. I said, I don't know what the hell's going on here, but I just asked this guy to be my teacher, and I didn't even know what that meant. I had to ask him later, and he said, I don't know, we'll see. But it was, so it was sort of like, you know, I don't know how you want to put it, but, you know, it wasn't my small self anymore. The true self was saying, wake up, you know, pay attention, look, you know, look, oh, you know, open your eyes and look. And so I got into it that way. It was a very different, you know, I didn't think I was looking for anything, and I wasn't particularly unhappy, maybe a little complacent in my job. It was kind of, you know, I was kind of had mastered it and was good at it. And I'm kind of like, but So it was just time. For me, it was time. About time, right? Because I was older. I hear a lot of the people on the call are a hell of a lot more with it than me, and a lot younger when they realize these things. And it was kind of like, okay, time for Cami, time for you to wake up. And so it started that way. And yeah, and a lot for me, it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot about this not knowing. I don't know why that happened. I don't know, and being able to really lean into that and be and keep deepening with that over the years. And yeah.
You know, Cami, well, I'll talk about Kripalu in a second, but I think your first Zen question was outside the bookstore going, who bought this book?
Exactly.
Who is it that buys the,
Who buys the book that I exactly.
What is it?
Who walks up to a teacher and asks them, somebody I just met to be my teacher?
Yeah, beautiful Zen question. Who is it that does this? Who is it that smells, that does, who tastes, who hears, what is it?
It's just a very kind of profound experience of that, like so out of so out of the little self's character.
I don't even know what year that was at Kripalu.
2006.
2006. Yeah, I remember that trip really well. Actually, I have a funny story about Kripalu because they, it's a big yoga place, right? It's really big. It used to be a Catholic monastery or something. It's huge, and we got there, and since Roshi was one of the teachers, they put him in this really nice house on the grounds. But since I was not, but I was with him, they put me in a room with a 6-person room, 3 bunk beds with a bunch of yoga guys, and it smelled like the worst locker room I'd ever been in, and it was cramped, and I just was like, oh, what am I doing here? This is horrible, and and this place is very busy, very big, and lots of people. But I think we were there 3 days, maybe longer. Do you remember, Cami?
Well, that very first one I was at was like the big mind part was the weekend, and then there was another, I think, 4 days. So it was almost like 6.5 days, I think.
Yeah. And after a couple of days in that smelly locker room that they put me in, I searched around and I found a bed and breakfast nearby, and I just moved out. But when I got to the bed and breakfast, I was like, oh, this will be better. And they put me in this room, it's in upstate New York, right? And it was this really, really cute old house, big house. And the bedroom they put me in was like, it was like my grandmother's bedroom. It was like all lace and flowers and little knickknacks, and it was like a culture shock from Kripalu, and also I don't know, I'll never forget that whole trip. But yeah, well, that's same thing happened to you though. You read something that struck you.
Yeah, so I did read something. It did, but I didn't intend to read it. It wasn't my idea, but it came to me. How
Who
it came.
knows? It's mysterious.
The little me didn't intend to read it. The true me, of course,
Yeah.
The master picked it up, and I didn't know about the master at that time. And, yeah.
A lot of our practice too is kind of learning the lingo of this whole thing, right? Which can take some time. I mean, besides just all the Buddhist words, just even the concepts and things, a lot of times are alien. But yeah, I don't know. Somehow the Bodhi mind is raised, right? In each of us, some moment in our lives, and some occasion or some thing happens.
I was going to say, I will say also, if I can, something about what Melissa was talking about. I mean, I think it is kind of natural to want to share. And as you probably remember, I was all gung ho at first, and I was doing big mind workshops all over my little town and area, and even working with patients and stuff. And that was all fine because I got permission from everybody. I told them, you know, I live in a small rural area of Wisconsin, so people don't know anything about Buddhism and Zen. And so I made sure people, you know, really knew what they, you know, were kind of getting into. And then after a while, yeah, it like now lately it's evolved into, I'm just available. Most people know that I'm a Zen monk, and if they want to ask me something, they can, but I don't feel like, for me, that original thing was actually almost more like me learning to facilitate, and they were almost helping me work my way through it. It was almost they were helping me more than I was maybe even sharing with them. Who knows? I think it was mutual. And now I feel like I think you can actually, if you get too excited, like if you use like the evangelism type thing, it's almost a perpetration if somebody's not interested in that, you know?
Yeah.
So if somebody asks me something, I'm happy to, but it's not like I feel like I gotta share something if it's not coming up, or yeah, I don't know. At least that's been my more current state of mind.
Yeah. Well, I should also say that, you know, sharing or teaching is a really good practice because, you know, you want to get it right, right? You want to say the right thing to the person, and it can expose our inability to do that to ourselves. You know, it can expose our maybe lack of clarity even, or at least, or, you know, lack of being able to express it clearly. And
That's
also,
really, yeah.
it's a great practice. And so that's why I would say don't shy away from, you know, don't be stingy with the Dharma, right? Go ahead and do it, because, and don't worry if you're, you know, if later on you go, oh, I shouldn't have said that way, or wasn't really clear on that. Just, you kind of got to go ahead and do it anyway, and learn from it. And, you know, the person's going to get what they're going to get. And the fact that they are even asking about it means they already have some self-motivation. So you have to trust that they're going to find their way too. Yeah, interesting story, Cami. Gloria, you had your hand up again?
Yes, about teaching. 7 years ago, a teacher of mine who was a disciple of Roshi asked me to teach, and it was very surprising because I didn't imagine myself teaching. And since then, I'm teaching a very small group of people. But it's what you were saying. I've learned so much since I teach, so much. Oof. It's another thing, it's to explain things. Oof. This is great. And it would be a shame if my students didn't come again. So I like now to teach. I like it.
It's a big responsibility, right? I mean, you know, you have to think about it, and practice and study and all these things. And, you know, your students they're going to be very, very good at finding little flaws in your argument, right? Or in your statement. And you have to go back and kind of clarify that. So yeah, it's a great practice. So
yeah.
And even as a layperson, you know, like I say, talking to your neighbors or friends about it, you know, you want to be able to put it across in a very clear way. And it's not easy.
Do you know a book, an introductory book to the Zen? A clear and easy to read or something? I cannot find something good and easy.
I know. I mean, you can't I mean, the sutras, it's such an interesting, the old language and the way they did things. And Thich Nhat Hanh, I think, is one of the clearest writers, sort of explaining
Yes.
Buddhism. And even there, though, there's a lot that you have to. Well, it's just so different than people's normal mode, especially if they're if they're feeling resistance. If you say, well, drop all your concepts, they're like, what are you, crazy? How could that be any good? Things like that. So I personally, it's funny, my mom has lived with my wife and I and daughter for the last 8 or 9 years. She's going to be 98 in December or in September.
Mine, my mom too.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And she's known for 25 years I've been into this stuff, and then I'm a monk and everything. And she asked me about a month ago, she goes, could you explain Buddhism to me? And because I've never really, I've never pushed it on her. We just live life and cook our meals and do all that, and I thought, where am I going to start with this? And so I basically just started with the Buddha and his kind of, just a short synopsis of his life story, that, he was a young man who, just like Cami said, there's something else going on here that, that I need to find out about. And it was this, we saw the suffering of the people in the village and knew of his own sort of internal suffering and things. And I said, so his intention, so I put it very clearly for his intention was to try to solve the problem of human suffering. And so he went about it this way. He talked to a lot of teachers, he read a lot of things, he meditated, he tried asceticism of starving himself and crawling on his hands and knees and all these kind of things that in India were practices and still are in some places. And then he suddenly had this enlightenment, and he said, I have figured out the cause of human suffering, and it's this, and I laid out the Four Noble Truths, and then I said, so there is suffering. The cause of suffering is basically delusion and desire, but that there is a path to liberation, and the path to liberation is the Eightfold Path. And I just kind of went down, and then she started, so I basically just drew this out on a sheet of paper, and she then started asking me questions about, particularly in the Eightfold Path, where it's right view, right meditation, right concentration, right livelihood, those things. And what does this mean? What do these things mean? And of course, that's a huge debate to this day, and there's a fundamentalist views of these things, and there's more like the Mahayana Tibetan view of those things. But, with brand new people like that who are asking me questions like that, I'll do it the same way, so that they're clear what it's about, and that this is a way that is going to make your life better. And most people, when they read the Eightfold Path, they can see that, oh yeah, if my views are wrong about something, that's not good for me, or if I can't concentrate, or if I have I don't know what all the different ones are. I just rattled them off, but now I can't remember. But if you kind of go step by step through, you can kind of go, yeah, this is a better way to live, and then the precepts, which are also kind of up for debate, but to not kill, not steal, don't lie, don't gossip, don't elevate yourself over others. Pretty much any rational human being can, even if they're in pretty bad shape, can kind of go, yeah, I know that this is the way to live. I know that this is a better way to live than what I'm doing. And they can quickly identify, yeah, I remember times I used to gossip all the time or put people down, and it would come back on me like a boomerang, and I lost friends or I hurt relationships. And so I just start with the basics. And I rarely will talk about dual and non-dual or relative and absolute or concepts of emptiness. Sometimes if people ask about karma, and I kind of simplify that, just down to cause and effect. But at first with people, I usually just, if they're brand new, I want to let them know that there's a lot of goodwill behind this practice that we do. And it's a goodwill for ourselves and for others and for the whole world. And just think about that and try to follow that. And we'll get into the other stuff later, And really, even one of the things I love about Thich Nhat Hanh and even the Dalai Lama, it's just like, they're asked, what is the highest truth of Buddhism? And they'll say, just be kind. Just, have a conscience and be nice and be useful and play, do your role the way it should be done. Things like that. And I think this is why any sort of focus on the lineage or the priest class or, monkdom and stuff, I think that's all fine, because, it shows a history and authenticity of the teachings. And we need people to teach, but I'm much more concerned about the wider effect, the broader effect on just the general population. And if enough people can kind of move this direction, it's just going to be so much better, even if people don't really understand all the principles or even the practices, if they can just be kinder, if they can just be useful and be generous and the precept about, don't gossip. Social media is like, that's all it is. Basically, people putting forth their opinions and other people trashing them for it, and it devolves into calling each other names and and not everything on social media. I mean, I really enjoy the funny dog movies and things like that. And I know that people communicate with their families that way and everything, but the general discourse that takes place in the West, and I don't know, maybe in the East too, is really corrosive and harmful. But you look at a country like Japan, and it's Japan's such an interesting case, because people generally are very polite and behave pretty well there. Not everybody, they have criminals and things too. But they always say, like, if you drop your wallet, and you forget about it, and you come back and it'll still be there, or somebody will track you down and give it back to you, and there's a certain humility, and it's not because all those people are practicing Buddhists, but it's because of the effect that Buddhism had on that country for so long, that it just is part of the culture, to be useful and be kind and those things. And gosh, I wish that for the US and Canada and everywhere. I wish that. So go forth and evangelize. Or at least don't be shy about it, And it's funny too, I think people who kind of follow that life, whether they're monks or not, they're pleasant to be around, and they, other people notice it and they don't really know why necessarily. And they might hear that you're into Buddhism and they might think, well, maybe I'll look into it more. But just, living that life, it just has a good effect as it is, and has some effect, even if you're not talking about it. Gloria.
I remember reading something that somebody asked to Maizumi Roshi, how could you bring the Buddhism teachings into the real life? And he said, be very kind with everybody. Be very kind with everybody. This is the way.
Yeah.
With everybody. This is important also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you see everyone as a Buddha, which they are, if you can remember to see everyone that way, even if they're misbehaving, it somehow has a softening effect, right? Hi, Ruth, you're in a car. And you're muted.
I am in a car. Better late than never, Bruce.
Yes. We're just winding it up, but it was a good one. You got to watch the video.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Are you on your way to your lunch with Meg?
No.
Okay. I'm never going to forget that one.
That was funny. All right, well, take care.
All right, you too. And everybody, I think time's up. And thank you so much for coming. Always appreciate it and enjoy these times. So good day.
Goodbye, Bruce.